In this video, we are going to talk about websites, and I am at a point in my life where I am rebuilding my website right now, and I'm getting that ready to go. And it's taken me a while to get to. I had a website for years and years, and I had been procrastinating changing that up because I was no longer doing the types of work that I was showing on there, and I really wanted to streamline some things. And I guess about a year ago, in an effort to try to make myself just do it, I took everything offline. I left some of my images on Flickr, and I left a homepage placeholder up, but that was about it. And it's taken me over a year now to get to. And just to be clear too, just as a photographer, I am not currently working either commercially or doing weddings or anything like that, and I'm also not selling prints. My priority has been these videos that I do, and so that's been really the focus over the last year, so that's where my attention has been. But lately I've actually gotten a little bit of time to revisit that and start to look into what I want to do with that to be more representative of what it is that I do. And so I'm working on that. And last night, I thought it'd make a good show topic. So last night I put a post up asking if you guys had any questions around the topic of websites. And I was very surprised in not only did I get a ton of questions, but the questions were really good. And I think that people are realizing that a website is part of a larger puzzle of a media plan. And how do you promote yourself as a photographer? So I think what I'm going to do is actually break this out, and we can do a couple videos actually looking into various topics on this. But let's go ahead and get to the questions, and we'll start off there. Stephen Cottrell writes, what are websites actually for nowadays? How do websites work for photographers? I think Stephen asks a very legitimate question here because we have seen the web evolve over the years, and social media is so prominent in this day and age that I actually know photographers that really just concentrate on Instagram, LinkedIn, and maybe a little bit of Facebook, and they're putting their work up there and they're showing their images there, and they're kind of relying on social media as a tool. A website, like anything else, is a tool, and it really depends on what the intent of your website is. If you were looking for people to hire you, it's important to find a way. You have to have a plan of how you're going to get eyes on your page. And so I think that those two things really work in tandem. The other thing that makes having a website still very significant and important is, let's use Instagram as the example. Instagram's been around for a couple of years now, but that's about it. And so we already saw recently when they changed the algorithm up and you no longer get images in chronological order, you're going to get them in order of what they think is interesting. That's a big deal. That offended a lot of people and made a lot of people really upset. And then the other thing is, what if all of a sudden something else comes out in the next year or two and Instagram isn't the cool thing anymore? And if you've put your entire business and work into Instagram as your promotional tool, you're good. That's going to go away. So I think having your own website still is relevant and still is important in terms of what you want to do with it. Scotty A. Smithereens writes, how relevant is printed portfolios in this quote-unquote digital age? Again, this is going to be different for different photographers. I personally think a printed portfolio is very important. A lot of times getting a job with somebody, if that is your intent, or selling a piece, it's going to all come down to God being in the details. And if you're showing that you can go the extra mile and have a beautiful printed portfolio when the time comes to actually go in and present that to somebody, I think it makes a huge difference. So I personally think they're still relevant. A lot of people think iPads have replaced that if you have a meeting with somebody. But again, if everybody's doing iPads, I personally would do what everybody's not doing. Mark McVeigh asks, how critical is a blog section as opposed to having an active Facebook page that is linked? I don't think a blog is super critical to have on your website. I think a lot of people have them because when you're building your website, there's kind of this fantasy idea that you're going to be updating it with new work all the time because it's fun and it's interesting. But I think it's important to be realistic with yourself. And if you really are going to commit to doing that, then fine, go for it. But the worst thing you can do is have a blog on there that hadn't been updated in 2 years, and the last image you posted was 2 years ago, and that date is on there, and I think that's a bad move. Brian Anderson asks, do testimonials help the portfolio? I put a few up, and I wonder how much they'll help the bottom line of the portfolio. Do people really just want to see the work and base their decision solely based on that if they might want to hire you? Testimonials basically serve one purpose, which is name dropping. And so, you know, when Roger Ebert was alive, he was a household name movie critic, and for years, every movie that came out wanted to get a Roger Ebert quote to put on their poster to make the movie seem legitimate. And that's kind of what this is serving with a website. And so it depends on what business you're in. And so if you're, for instance, trying to get work doing commercial advertising, then you probably need to have the biggest art director names in your market to give your testimonials on there. I think that would be beneficial. If you do weddings, for instance, I think certainly having the biggest wedding planners in your market, names that people are going to recognize that make you sound legit. If you don't have those, I wouldn't put them on there, because if it's just Bob Jones giving you a testimonial, I don't think it really does much for you. David Butler writes, how much emphasis do you put on personal work versus commercial, even when it is vastly different aesthetically? If your commercial work and your personal work are really that much different aesthetically, I think you need to question as to whether or not the personal work needs to be on the website. And the only reason I say that is because if the whole purpose of your website is to possibly help land jobs, you don't want to confuse people when they get there. And I think that is a big problem. I think photographers in general, we tend to want to show more and show more and show more because our work means something very personal to us, but you do have to consider the experience of somebody coming to your site. Now, if you really want to show your personal work, you might consider a second website to do something like that, but I think it just runs the risk of competing too much with your primary intent. Gregor asks, how do you recognize and choose your best work? How do you choose your best photos? Being your own curator can be hard now in the digital age. Well, the honest answer is that you can't, and no photographer can. And the problem that we have as photographers is that we are too close to our own work to be able to see it objectively. We are emotionally attached to our work because we saw how it was made. Sometimes if a particular shot was difficult to set up, we know how hard it was to do, so we're very proud of that. Whereas an art director, somebody might see that and they don't get touched the same way because they didn't have that experience. And so because of that, I think it's really important to get people to give opinions on your portfolio before you put it live that know what they're talking about, that will give you an honest answer. So not friends, not family, not people who won't be honest with you. You need to reach out to people who you can find in the business, offer to buy them lunch, but get other people to give your opinion and take it with a grain of salt. They may not be right, and I would get 2 or 3 different people to do that, and then you can make a final judgment call based on their input. I want to take a second and give a shout out to our sponsor today, who coincidentally are the awesome folks over at Squarespace.com. Squarespace are awesome, and if you are trying to build a website, portfolio, online store, and you want the easiest framework there is to use, I think Squarespace is worth your time to check out. You can go over there and sign up for a free trial, and you can immediately build a landing page, you can build a gallery, you can build an online store, whatever that is. I like Squarespace because you start with a template, and you can completely customize it from there, so it couldn't be easier to build a site. And then when you want to build a gallery of images, if you can drag and drop a folder of images from your desktop to your web browser, you can build a gallery. And I can save you money on your initial order. So if you decide Squarespace is right for you, use offer code AOP on checkout. That is offer code AOP. That'll save you an additional 10% off your order. And I'll give a special shout out and thanks to the folks at Squarespace for sponsoring another episode of The Art of Photography. Carolyn writes a very interesting question here, which is, what should a student in high school include in a portfolio in wanting to enter the photography field after high school? I actually really like this question, and I think in high school, of course, there are exceptions of people who are enormously talented, but even then, you're still going to have age working against you, and it really depends on what you want to do beyond high school. In high school, photographers tend to be a little bit younger, and there are experiences and years that are going to come after high school that are going to have an enormous impact on people as photographers and as artists. And I think the most important thing you can do with a portfolio coming out of high school is look at what possibilities you're going to have to further your development. For some people, that's going to be college or university, and I think for other people, it might be working for a photographer, being able to assist. There are others too, but I think that's what you're looking at. So I think the most important thing you can do is show as wide a range as possible. Show that you know how to light things. Show that you can use natural light as well. Show that you can do landscapes, people, whether that's portraits or still lifes or whatever that is, and show the biggest range you possibly can. Then look to what is going to be that next step that's going to take your expertise as a photographer and your skill level up a notch. Linda Wagner writes, should the portfolio consist of all of your work or just the types of jobs that you want? No question, it should be the kind of work you want to be doing. Now, this is really difficult for a lot of people, and let's say you've been shooting weddings and you want to go into architecture. Well, architecture projects are not going to hire you unless you have architecture in your portfolio. And this is where it gets difficult because a lot of people, if you've been doing one thing and you're interested in doing another, you don't have the two lined up yet. So this is where you need to start firing up personal projects and you need to start spending some time working on that portfolio. But don't view it as a burden. View it as a way to, you are going to reshape your career and the kind of work that you're going to be doing. I personally think that can be really exciting. Katia writes, this might be a little bit tangential, but once you have the website, other than SEO, how do you get people there to see it? Once you have the portfolio just so, who do you send it to? I know it's a little off topic. So the question is a little tangential, but honestly, I think it's a really important question because honestly, the website is basically a tool in this bigger piece that we're working on. And the harder part is trying to figure out how to get eyes on the website. And SEO, if you're not familiar with that term, is an acronym that stands for Search Engine Optimization. And it really was trending around the time Google came out, and Google was how people were finding things on the web. Now, that was the days before social media was as popular as it is now and as widely used as it is now. And search engine optimization is a process of adding things onto your website. Like at the time, it was like keywords, titles, descriptions, making sure your image tags, the alt tag was filled out with something descriptive. And the whole idea was that these would give the search engine, i.e. Google, cues that your website was about a certain thing and hopes that you would outrank your competition when people would search for certain things. And the reality of it is that I think that's gone by the wayside now because social media is one big piece of that. The advertising that we have available to us now as photographers has changed quite a bit. I still think that word of mouth and actually meeting people face to face is a big key to being successful as a photographer. So there's all those things, and I'm not saying SEO is not important at all. It is important to have a tight website, but I just don't think, I question as to whether or not that's a good use of your time to spend, especially if it's something you're throwing money at. So for instance, if you think you want to rank for something like when somebody searches wedding photographers in Dallas, let's say, well, if you actually go Google that right now and put in whatever city you're in, you're going to find that it is highly competitive. There are a lot of people who want to rank for that term and people who will pay money to rank for that term. And so even if you have the budget to rank for that term and be the #1 search result, I question as to whether or not that's worth it, because who's going to sit down and Google wedding photographer in Dallas? I think it's going to be somebody who just got engaged, somebody who hasn't talked to a wedding planner yet, somebody who's new in that process, and they may not have quite the budget that somebody who's going to use a different process to find their photographer is going to get. And I definitely think when you get into commercial photography, I don't think there are any art directors who Google to find their photographers. I just don't think it happens. So I think using things like LinkedIn, being on Instagram, being active on Facebook, those are really important things. And it still is going to come down to word of mouth. I mean, there's so many things to it. Anyway, I feel like this whole Q&A, one, it was a little long, and two, it was a little all over the place, which I actually liked. What I would like to do is this. I'm producing a lot of content these days, and one of the things I would like to do is kind of have like this kind of thing we do on Tuesdays, and I don't want to keep it too rigid, but Friday is kind of an open day, and I think this is an important thing for us to discuss as photographers. I would like to know what you guys think. If you agree or disagree with me on any of this, you can leave a comment below, but I want to revisit this next Friday as well. And what I'll do is start using your questions to kind of prepare for that episode, because there are so many topics we can talk about, and I think it's bigger than what we can discuss in one video here. And so that's what I want to do, is kind of start to get into this, and maybe I can talk to some other photographers on here and people who have done it. We'll see how it goes, but I will put some stuff together to talk about all those kinds of things. So anyway, until the next video, if you guys enjoyed this one, please remember to like it, share it, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.